Whether you're looking for some new play styles or kind of just looking for some new augments, either crystal augments or maybe some legendary augments you might have gotten over the last few years, today I'll be talking about the best augments, the best play styles, and just overall the best tips for every single turret in Tanki Online. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first turret we're talking about is Firebird. Now for this turret, probably the best crystal augment you're going to get is Incendiary Mix. Now although Pulsar did get nerfed, it's also another really good augment if you have it. With Firebird, the typical drones I like to use are either Crisis or Booster or Trickster. Now Trickster is typically my go-to just because when you're using Firebird Freeze, these short range turrets, the enemy players are typically going to run from you, which can get really annoying if you don't have that extra speed. Now some turrets have augments that can increase the range of your turret if it's a short range turret, which if you have those augments, you don't really have to use Trickster. But for Firebird, if you're using something like Pulsar or Incendiary Mix, I would definitely recommend using Trickster just because it can be so annoying if an enemy team or an enemy player can run from you. I also like to use Crisis with this turret just because Crisis is just amazing, and if you have a 1v1, you can typically outperform the enemy player. The only time Crisis is not really effective is if there's multiple people looking at you and you need to have double armor on at all times. Now let's move on to Freeze. So Adrenaline, High Pressure Pump, and Corrosive Mix are all decent augments for being crystal augments. A lot of the turrets, surprisingly, in Tanki Online have pretty decent crystal augments. There are a few turrets that don't have any good crystal augments, but Freeze certainly isn't one of them. Now recently I've really enjoyed High Pressure Pump, since if I don't want to use Trickster, it can get really annoying when people run from you. So High Pressure Pump narrows your shot but lets you shoot basically twice as far, so if someone tries to run from you and you don't have Trickster, you can use your freeze effect on top of the High Pressure Pump to be able to shoot someone who's running from you and pretty far away. Now Pulsar is probably the best buyer augment for this turret if you aren't using one of the good crystal augments, but overall there aren't too many different unique legendary or exotic augments for this turret, so I would just go with Pulsar. So when you're using freeze, you want to be aggressive and choose 1v1s, because if you're going into the entire enemy team, you're only going to be able to shoot 1 or 2 enemies at a time tops, so definitely choose the 1v1s with this turret. Alright, next is Isida. So Isida has really good crystal augments like Support Nanobots or Nanomass Reactor. I'm honestly surprised Nanomass Reactor is still a crystal augment because it's that good. You basically get your energy back after a kill, so if you choose to attack someone who you know you're going to kill in one full burst of your energy, you can get your shot back instantly or your energy back instantly and go for another guy just after you kill that dude. Also, not many people have Isida protection, which makes this turret even better. It's probably one of the least protections used in Tanki. Sure, you don't get splash damage like with Freeze or Firebird, but getting the healing effect makes for a much better team experience than with Firebird or Freeze, where the game is more so a solo experience with those turrets because you can't do much for your team. Not to mention, it has one of the best fun augments in the game, which is Vampire Nanobots, which heals you after attacking an enemy player. Honestly, this turret is pretty underappreciated just because no one uses protection against it, which is huge in this game. A turret can be mediocre, but if no one uses protection against it, it can go from a mediocre turret to a really good turret. Next is Tesla. So Tesla can either be a camping turret or attacking turret depending on the augment you use. Now Acceleration Protocol, which is a crystal augment, is amazing for an offensive player since your ball is twice as fast, whereas if you're using Dilatory Protocol where your ball is super slow, you're going to want to camp and chain your shots more easily. If you're using Dilatory Protocol and being offensive, it can be really hard to sit in one corner, wait for your shot to move really slowly to chain it while there's like no enemies coming around you. Now most of the status effect augments are pretty decent for this turret as well, since you get your critical shot pretty fast from what I find. I don't really use Tesla all the time, and it can definitely be annoying when you have multiple camping Teslas just chaining shots, but it could also be pretty fun if you get offensive with it and have a teammate helping you chain shots. Now let's move on to Hammer. So my favorite crystal augment for this turret is probably High Capacity Ammo Clip or Duplet. I'll probably often find myself using Duplet more often, since High Capacity Ammo Clip can sometimes not be that great if the enemy has protection. With this turret, you want to play around obstacles every time you're waiting for your turret to reload. Like if the map has a bunch of different houses, peek out of the house, take a few shots, hide back behind the house while you're waiting for it to reload, and just kind of repeat that. However, there are a few augments with this turret where you don't need to use cover, like Adaptive Reload or Assault Magazine. With Adaptive Reload, literally if you pick your fights and you choose the right fights, you never have to reload, which can make this thing an absolute monster. And then with Assault Magazine, the reload is already so fast, if the enemy doesn't have protection, you can basically just destroy them in one burst. Currently though, this turret isn't too amazing because a lot of people have protection against it. Alright, Twins. Now, I don't think I see Twins ever. I see Isidas with healing augments more than I see Twins. That's just because recently Twins is just super underused. The two best crystal augments are plasma accelerators and stabilized plasma. With plasma accelerators, your shots are able to go twice as fast, and with stabilized plasma, you don't get splash damage, but you also don't get self damage. Your aim is super important with this turret because your shots are really slow depending on the augment, and it can be difficult to hit your shots. If you're defending, I'd suggest using augment with no splash damage, but if you're attacking, I'd suggest a fast shooting augment like plasma accelerators or plasma turbo accelerators. All right, now let's move on to Ricochet. Now Ricochet is one of my favorite turrets, but only if I'm using Helios. It doesn't really have any good crystal augments apart from plasma torch, and ever since the nerf where you can no longer get 100% status effects on bounce shots, most of the status effect augments kind of suck. Berserk and Helios are some of the only good augments, but I'd recommend using drones like Crisis or Booster with this turret because the base damage honestly isn't that good when it comes to turrets. With Ricochet though, it's pretty fun to be kind of aggressive and use your surroundings to your advantage, such as bouncing shots so that enemies can't hit you. Now Smokey is one of the most underappreciated turrets in the game. As of recently though, it's been getting a bit of support from a lot of people like myself and the detective. Most of the crystal augments like assault rounds and high precision aiming system are better than the exotic and legendary augments in the game. I personally enjoy high precision aiming system the most since the 40% increased damage for only a 20% reload nerf is really good. The turret is also amazing for an aggressive player since the reload is so fast and not many people have protection against it. Honestly, one of the best parts is that the augments are really good and not many people have protection, so it's overall really great. Now onto Striker. So Striker currently is a really good turret with most of the exotic augments in the game. However, without an exotic augment, it's not too great. The crystal augments are kind of mediocre. Sure, you have remote rocket explosives and Cyclone, but they're not amazing. However, if you do have Tandem, Hydra, Faust, or Vacuum, you're likely dominating in most of your games since these augments still need a massive nerf. To be fair, they are hard to get because they're all exotic, but let's be honest, the mega buyers are getting those no matter what. The only plus that I see with Striker being so good is that you're mostly only seeing it in Juggernaut battles since that's the meta to kill the Juggernaut. So outside of it, it's not nearly as annoying and you don't see it nearly as often. Vulcan is another turret that is kind of slept on. The best augment for crystals is definitely reinforced aiming transmission, and although it's not nearly as good as before the buff happened where you can turn your turret just as fast when shooting, it's still really good. Incendiary Band used to be good until they changed how having fire immunity works with this augment. Now Explosive Band and Shredder are also really decent exotic augments I would recommend using if you don't want to use rats. One thing I like about this turret is if you're using mouse controls, it's really easy to control. If you're really good with keyboard, it's not too hard, but with mouse controls, you can move around and keep your turret in one spot a lot easier, and it can be really effective. Now we're on to Thunder, and I'll be honest, Thunder has no good crystal augments, which makes it really bad unless you have an amazing exotic augment. Currently, Thunder is just one of the worst turrets in my opinion. However, if you have Vacuum, Adaptive Reload, or Hyperspeed, the turret isn't terrible. I enjoy a more aggressive approach with this turret, and since the damage drop-off is pretty high, it works kind of for my playstyle. Although since the base damage for Thunder is pretty crap unless you have an amazing augment, I almost never go to this turret. All right, now on to Scorpion. So obviously Scorpion is a camping turret by definition, but I personally enjoy a half aggressive, half camping style. Wolfpack is probably the best crystal augment since your rockets can move 500% faster, but in terms of exotic augments, I really enjoy Spear since it's harder for enemies to hide behind objects since your rockets are so fast and they shoot so high. With the Spear augment, you can push a little bit to get more opportunities to lock on enemies since you don't need a super far range in order to hit your shots. Since only around a sixth of the players have this augment, I'd recommend using Swarm or Tornado instead if you don't have Spear. All right, now on to Railgun, one of the most OG turrets in the game. So personally with Railgun, I really enjoy being super aggressive with a light hull. Now this way I can use obstacles to protect myself while taking pop shots at the enemies. There aren't many good crystal augments, but hopefully by now you'll have at least one legendary to exotic augment since there are just so many augments for Railgun. You have large caliber rounds, round of stabilization, Death Herald, hyperspace, and hyperspeed, which are all decent Railgun augments. Now of course they are legendary and exotic, so you do have to get lucky, but since there's so many good ones, hopefully your chances of getting one of the good ones is higher. Now the main downside is most games about half the team will have Railgun protection, which is why I enjoy round of stabilization the most, because round of stabilization has a 50% chance for crit damage, and when you do crit damage on the enemy, their protection doesn't really matter. All right, on to Magnum. So personally I really hate Magnum and I never use it, so that's all I have to say about that. Now we're on to Gauss. Gauss is honestly not that great anymore, especially the salvo shot. The amount of time it takes for your salvo shot to reload makes this thing kind of ineffective at close ranges. Now large caliber is probably the best crystal augment since your arcade shot deals 35% more damage, and pairing this with booster can make it super effective with the arcade portion. Although yeah, the salvo shot kind of sucks, but the arcade portion of the turret is really good. Solenoid cooling is probably the best exotic augment since your salvo time is buffed by 50% reload. I just don't enjoy Gauss all that much just because I'd rather use other turrets when going to play close range with the arcade shot. All right, now we're finally on to the last turret, Shaft. So Shaft is a great turret for camping, but if you use the crystal augment short band emitters or the legendary augment rapid fire mode, it can also be great for attacking. So heavy capacitors is probably the best crystal augment for camping, and then everybody loves a teammate with healing emitters. It's one of the best feelings to be shot from a Shaft healing you from across the map when you're about to die. I love Shaft players who use healing emitters because sure, they're camping, but at least they're helping you. Usually campers are just helping themselves and doing nothing, but if the camper has healing emitters, I'm honestly all for it. But yeah, there's some tips for every single turret in the game. Definitely let me know if you think I missed any tips in the comments down below. Don't forget to use Creative Tech Taspens. I'll see you in a future video. Peace out, everyone.